So, good evening, everyone. We are here with another edition of A Little Perspective. And today I have Danielle Frank. And thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Danielle and I met through the LPA Today magazine. She is the copy editor, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I had the huge privilege of being a contributing author this quarter, and just super honored to be amongst all those other amazing LPs and just talk about wellness. I have a degree from Tulane in health and wellness, and I chose health and wellness because I understand as a little person how important optimal wellness is. And so to be a part of that theme in the magazine was super exciting. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess let's just start out, just tell me a little bit about yourself, Danielle.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Danielle Frank. I live right outside of Philadelphia. I have achondroplasia and I'm 30 years old. I'm single, no kids. My parents are average height, so they did not know a little person until they had me. And I've been a lifetime member of LPA, Little People of America. And in the past, I'd say 5-6 years, I really have done a lot of volunteering and leadership in the organization. I was national teen coordinator, so I did a lot of teen programming for LPA. Then I moved on to young adult coordinator. I was on the board of directors as the programs director for 2 years, where I headed up the LPA scholarship program, and also LPA's conference travel grant program. So providing grants, assistance for families to attend conference for the first time. And then I took this opportunity as copy editor, just because I feel as though that the LPA Today magazine is so important because it's something that all members can benefit from and get a piece of LPA delivered to them. I'm always saying that, I love going to conferences and I love going to events. Conferences and even attending regionals or even local chapter events it's a privilege because some people can't attend due to socioeconomic reasons, due to physical barriers, things like that prevent them from actually being in person and participating. So at least LPA Today magazine can bring LPA to them and they can feel connected to the little person community as a whole. And it gives our members a platform to share their voices and perspectives with others. I think that, though we are little people, we are all vastly different. We come from different parts of the country. We were raised different. We have just different ways of seeing life, so I just think that magazine can celebrate our differences within our difference. So outside of LPA, so LPA is kind of like my volunteer baby in a way. But outside of LPA, I am an academic advisor for Pierce College in downtown Philadelphia. And Pierce serves primarily working adults. So people who, I say the sandwich generation, who they're maybe taking care of older relatives, taking care of their kids, but also going back to school as well. And as far as hobbies go, I'm a huge Disney travel fan. I love to travel and I love going to Disney World, and my friends, make fun of me for all the time, but that's what I love to do. And I love planning trips, and not just Disney, but other things. And I just love being around family and friends and enjoying time with them. But I would say LPA is really my baby in terms of leading and volunteering. Yeah.
That's awesome. I am very new to LPA. I knew of it, but just hadn't really thought anything about it. But I ended up went to New York for this, to do this, what's it called? Panel thing. And they paid for my trip and everything. And then learned from the other moms, it's all parents of children with achondroplasia dwarfism. First of all, I was the only little person in my age group. All the other moms were tall, and I really had no idea that so many, LPs are born to average height parents. I knew it happened. I just didn't
80%.
realize. Yeah, 80%. That's
Yeah.
huge to me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so then they started talking about some stuff like all the Facebook groups and stuff that we have. And when I came home, I started like joining them and getting really involved. And I was like, and now it's just been like this big deep
Mm-hmm.
dive, because I've traveled 18 hours to go to our first ever meeting, because it was the closest one. And it was mind blowing for the kids. It was incredible for us. And so it's just such a neat organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you say about the magazine, how it's just that, staple for everyone who,
Mm-hmm.
may or may not be able to go to meetings.
And I think too is that LP is an organization where people are joining at different times in their lives. I've met people who joined when they were in diapers, and they're babies. And then I know people who joined in their 20s or 30s, or maybe took a break, during their college years, and then came back, or like you maybe felt motivated to, now that you have children who are little people. And so I think that it's an organization that's always going to be there for you. And it's okay if you need to take a break, or if you're starting a little bit later, because there's so many people who are in that exact same position, starting at different times or taking breaks from the organization, coming back, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really neat point too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're being a counselor for what when I was at Tulane, we called it non-traditional students.
Yeah, not traditional. Yes. Mm-hmm.
All of us old fogies who decided to finally finish school.
Mm-hmm.
It's neat because we have a couple different colleges down here, and I chose Tulane for a number of reasons, but having that separation of being a non-traditional student, being able to connect with other people who are in the same kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation was, great. I mean, I can't imagine if I had to go to class with a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds every night, I'm 38.
Yeah, no, it definitely, and I think, again, when you're 18 or 19, and I'm speaking about maybe kids who are privileged where college is just their only focus at that time,
Yeah.
but again, you're focusing on your work, and you're focusing on your kids, and you're doing work at 10 o'clock at night when you put your kids to bed and things like that. And it's very, I really do admire my students for their tenacity, and even if it takes them 8 years to get their degree and they're just doing one class at a time, like, they're doing it. And I've learned a lot from them.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So why did you already explained that you're super involved in LPA in so many ways, and that's so cool, because I've come to realize how reliant the organization is on volunteers. Most nonprofits are, but we really, really are. And luckily we have some amazing people who step up and, take on these responsibilities. What made you choose, copy editor? Do you have experience in that field, or just interest you, or?
So I've always enjoyed writing. I've enjoyed being kind of creative. When I was in college, I dabbled a little bit in writing, and in high school as well. I would produce our high school musicals. So I would do writing for like the paper or press releases. And then in college, I actually spent a semester in Los Angeles. So I did a column about being the study away student from Philadelphia, for the California Schools newsletter. And then my positions when I was National Teen Coordinator and LPA Young Adult Coordinator, I was also a chapter president. And then being on the board of directors, I was always able to contribute to the magazine for different articles or columns. And I thought, well, I have a lot of this experience. And like I said, also too, it's kind of those positions, as I get a little bit older in life, being on the board and being teen coordinator or adult coordinator, required to go to conference. It was a commitment to go to conference every year. And I'm at the point in my life where I don't know if I can commit to going to conference every single year. So this allowed me to stay involved and make a difference in the organization. I will disclaim it. It is a position where there is a small stipend. But luckily that I have my job where that's how I make my income. And I'm very grateful that LPA provides me that stipend. But, it was just another way of being involved, staying connected, and using that creative side I have in me. And I think the magazine is a lot of work, and those who did this before me, they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. and we don't want it to go in people's trash cans when they get it. We want people to actually read it. So that's really important to me, that there's content and that there's, like I said, LPA is very diverse, whether it's different races, different ages, different dwarfism types, geographical differences, things like that. And I want people to open the magazine and say, look, there's me. Yes, they'll see another little person, but they'll say, oh, there's a little person who looks like me or has similar experiences or things like that. So that was really kind of important for me to make sure that was still continuing in the magazine and things like that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I've noticed that there's been a push for inclusivity and equality within LPA itself, which like you said, we are all fall under the umbrella of having dwarfism, but there's so many other differences, and if we understand that seeing our own representation matters, then the further you can go with that, the better. So that's great that you guys are really focusing on that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of dwarfism do you have?
So I have achondroplasia like you. I think what makes me unique compared to some, I'm not saying all, but the majority of ACONs is that I unfortunately went through a lot of spinal surgeries because, some ACONs have head shunt issues or the ear problems or bowing of the legs or things like that. And I just have a tricky spine, I guess. So I've been through about 8 spine surgeries or around that number. I haven't counted. So I primarily use assistive devices to get around. And I would say I deal with some paralysis and things like that. So it's interesting because I am an ACON, but sometimes I feel like I identify more with the minority dwarfism types that have more of the mobility issues. Like one of my closest friends in LPA has SED, and I can relate to her a lot more than my ACON friends because she has, and I'm not saying every person with SED has mobility challenges, but more I would say do than maybe compared to achondroplasia. So I can relate to her more sometimes than I can with my friends who have achondroplasia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. My sister, I assumed you were ACON, but sometimes you try not to assume. My sister had several surgeries, spine issues, and ended up not being able to walk. And she also had urostomy and colostomy bags for the restroom. And so she had her first electric wheelchair in kindergarten. She got her first service dog in junior high, I want to say. And so all of those things obviously were huge help for her independence and such, because she, despite being physically held up, she was mentally very independent. So and I often think sometimes with those physical struggles comes an even more headstrong mental capacity, which is a good thing. How old were you when you had your first surgery?
Well, I stopped breathing at 3 months, and then they rushed me to the hospital. I had some sort of, I know it's a common surgery that ACONs go through, or people with dwarfism, of that when they're babies, and I'm totally blanking out on that. So that was that. And then throughout childhood, I never had the ear infections. I never had the shunt problems. I was really a healthy kid. Actually, I was born with an Erb's palsy in my left arm due to the way I came out of the birth canal. It's nothing to do with dwarfism. It's just my left arm doesn't have the function as my right arm does. But again, it has nothing to do with achondroplasia. And then probably in 5th grade, I got stenosis, and I had to wear the halo and the neck brace. And then I would say in middle school, I had 2 back-to-back spine surgeries. Unfortunately, I grew up in the 90s, or that's my childhood was in the 90s. And And, back then there wasn't Facebook parent groups or things like that. And my mom was just going off of, when I stopped breathing at 3 months old, we just decided to go to that doctor who treated me. And we think that possibly that we went back to him when I was in 5th grade and I did a surgery, and we possibly think that that surgery was not correct. And that if I went to an LP doctor probably before that, maybe I wouldn't have had these challenges, because we think that the one surgery I had in 5th grade led to surgeries in middle school and further on in life. But, we don't, that was just back then, that time. My parents were trying to do the best they could for me. And, but again, there was no social media, things like that. So then I kind of had a new normal in, let's say middle school and high school. I was using like a scooter for long distances. But I could walk, without a walker, things like that. And then in college, it got really bad. And I just never realized that spinal stenosis could continue to come back. And in my junior year of college, it got really bad. And I had an emergency spine surgery, and it left me with a new normal of being pretty dependent on assisted devices and things like that. And, it's not, I try to be a positive person, but I allow myself to have those days where I'm like, this is shitty, or, would my life have been different if, the outcomes of my surgery were different? I'm human. I think that all the time. But, I think that, it has made me into a stronger person. It has made me appreciate life more. It has made me, navigate life differently, but, I still try to accomplish things in life and things like that. And, but it's hard, I'm not going to lie and smile like it's easy. It's hard. And a lot of it is, I think, societal structures. I believe in the social model of disability, where I want society to adapt to my needs and what I need, and, being accessible and following the ADA and things like that. But we live in a society that's very medical model focused, which you need to be fixed and you're the problem. And you need to get stronger and blah, 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 blah. And I quote Stella Young, who was a famous TED Talk, no amount of smiling and positive attitudes going to make me a flight of stairs turn into a ramp, things like that. So I think a lot of the frustrations in life is, I try not to say, Danielle, it's not you, it's society not adapting yet, or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We think my sister's surgery was a similar situation, was similar to yours, where one of them was not done well, and then it just led to more.
Yeah, and I feel so, luckily after those surgeries, I live in Philadelphia, so I live close to AI DuPont Hospital, which the famous Dr. William McKenzie is at. And then I was also at Johns Hopkins, where Dr. Michael Ain, and I don't know if you knew this, but Ben Carson, who ran for president, he was one of my surgeons. So I'm lucky that I live a drive away from some of the best hospitals in the world. And I feel for people who live in the middle of the country because you can't go to any doctor now. You really can't. And I'm 30 years old and I'm able to go to AI DuPont Children's Hospital till I'm 35. I am nervous. I do live in Philadelphia, and we have Penn and Jefferson, but you can have the best hospitals in the world, but if they haven't treated a little person, it can be pretty dicey. So, but I do see privilege in that I'm lucky that I live just a drive away from some of the best LP specialists and things like that. So,
yeah, absolutely. That is a blessing. And you're right. We didn't have social media and connections like that back then, and it makes so much of a difference now. So,
and I'm glad we do now for your children. Gosh forbid they have to go through something like that. That you can kind of get on that. And but yeah, it's a totally different world we live in now.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but do these talks of a cure or a treatment or whatever, if you were given that option today to cure your dwarfism, would you take that?
I know it's a very hot button issue.
You don't have to answer it if you don't.
I'm happy to answer. Number one, I kind of alluded to this in the beginning of our conversation, is that I know that a lot of LPs are feeling a lot of different ways about this. And I'm a person who, and I'm not perfect, and I've made mistakes. I try not to judge other individuals' choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember growing up in LPA, I was friends with somebody who I think her parents like made her get the limb lengthening because they were kind of like almost ashamed of her.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up, my parents, even though they're average height, like they love me and they were like, my mom, when I was born, my mom's the doctor. Okay, I'll tease her hair and put some high heels on her. Like, my parents love me and if I wanted to get maybe limb lengthening, like they would have been like okay with it, but it was never, they loved me for who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remember that a lot of LPs aren't born into that.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're going through that, we can't necessarily judge and be like, how could you go through that? Like, we just don't know what the environment they live in, the school that they go to, things like that. So if anyone's watching this and you're debating that, like, I love you as a person, as a fellow person in the LP community, and I'm not going to judge your decision, because it's hard. And I know that I come from a different family and environment than other people do per se. Would I get it? The height doesn't bother me. Being 3'10" is nothing, in my opinion. The stuff I went through is really difficult, and it has made me miss out on things in life. So my quality of life, I am worried about my quality of life. I'm lucky that I have family and friends who love me, who can help me out, and I have a job where I can support myself. But if I didn't have those things, it would have been really tough. So if it could help with my quality of life and spinal issues, yes. But it's not that I want it just because I don't want to look like a dwarf, or I don't want to be 3'10". Like, that stuff to me does not matter. It's just quality of life. I would consider it as my own personal. How about you? Or you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said, 100%. I think the fact that 80% of LPs are born to average height parents is a huge factor in this. And my mom is little, but her parents weren't. So if it were me or my mom, with our kids, the answer is no, because we know that living with achondroplasia is not impossible. But when you're an average height parent and you're having a child and you want what's best for the child, and you, especially if you have a doctor telling you all these things that, like, oh, they could be paralyzed, they could they can never walk, they could have all these things that are legit, like, can happen, then I can absolutely see why they would choose that. And I don't judge them for it. I'd rather everybody just kind of own their, it would be in an ideal world, we can all be confident in the fact that we are, like you said, it's not about the cosmetics of it. It would be more so about the medical of it. But I do think that there's validity in average height parents being concerned about having a LP child.
And I think it goes back to, like I said, with this social versus medical disability. If
Yes.
we had more representation of, and there are LPs who are doctors, lawyers, doing incredible things, but we see certain images on TV or things like that, and I think my mom didn't know what a little person was. She remembers, I guess maybe she knew the thing or the person on TV per se, but she remembers using the M word when she was like in her early 20s, and she saw a little person on the boardwalk and she thought that was acceptable, and then it took her to me. And it is, we, even though we live our lives and we have, you and I we have such a great community of people who love us and support us, like, many people don't know, like, you're the first little person they're ever going to meet, or not from a TV show or things like that. And so hopefully we can, I think, with more representation and just more representation, I think that it could change that narrative, especially for average height parents.
I completely agree. I forget how rare dwarfism is, because I guess because I have intentionally filled my Facebook with as many, LPs that I can friend, and you know, we started an LPA chapter in Mississippi.
I know, I'm so excited for you guys.
Yeah, and so first one in decades. So, you know, I feel like I'm kind of in it, and so I just forget that, like in my town, so I went to pick up my son, and this lady at the school said that she saw an LP, and she was just talking to me about
Mm-hmm.
how she sews clothes, and the lady that she saw needed her clothes sewed, and she was just saying, if you know anybody, I'm happy to do, you know, help out, da, da, da. And I said, well, I don't even know who you're talking about, like, you know, because there's only like 3 of us on the coast. I'm like, oh, there's a new one, like I need to find him, you know, because I forget how rare it is.
It is interesting though, because it is, and I hate to use this pun, but it is, once you start getting connected to the community, you start seeing the same, but you may not know people's names, but you see people and you know people's you know, faces, and it does become a small world.
Yeah.
My aunt lives in Los Angeles, and I guess some little people live out there for acting or just, you know, things like that in general. I know that California district's a big district with a lot of LPs. And my aunt's a very not a shy person, and she'll just go up to you like, "Hey, I have a niece and a little person," and she ran into two little people in a store or something, or 2 separate times. She goes, "Hey, you know my niece?" And I think the one girl, I think she knew who I was, and I knew who she was, and maybe
Yeah.
I did. But like, when she showed me their picture, I'm like, "Yeah, I know their faces." I'm like, "Aunt Sunny, like you probably shouldn't do that all the time, because some people might be offended by that." But then it is, or that's it's also interesting too, like when pre-COVID, I would take the train into Philadelphia for work, and I would see this gentleman, a little person, who come on the train at this one stop, and he going to Philadelphia as well. And I'm like, how come I never seen you? And like, you want to go up and be like, hey, there's this great thing called LPA. You want to join? But then you realize that some people little people like don't want to be involved, or maybe they had a terrible experience. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. So you there's not many of us, but then when you get involved in our community, you're like, you start recognizing people and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, things like that. And you kind of just, you go to conference like, I know that face. I've seen that face before.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah.
Yeah, it's neat. I hate that we couldn't go to Austin this year. I was so excited about that, but
I know it's very weird that there wasn't, you know, any LPA. I mean, I understand why they had to make that decision, things like that. And I'm hoping Baltimore, we just don't know with this climate that we're living in right now. But yeah, I'm grateful for Zoom. It doesn't replace it and everything, but you know, I hope that LPA, I think that, and not to go off on a different subject, but I think that COVID taught us a lot of, like, it made us appreciate things in life. And I think it also um, showed us that we can live life a little bit differently and still, you know, connect and communicate with people. And I hope that we continue to do, like, I know I'm a Christian, and this is outside of LPA, but a LP friend of mine, we're going to probably start a Bible study, just, you know, just a Zoom and just connect with others. If you want to join, just private message me if anyone's watching this. But, you know, just ways of, you know, using those platforms and being like, okay, well, we don't know when the next time we're going to see each other. And again, in conference stuff does not replace physical, doesn't replace not being with us, not being, or
yeah.
internet. But again, like I said, conferences and events are privileged. So the more we can do virtually throughout the year as a balance between in-person events and virtual events, I think that that's really important, because I think that we are, you know, hopefully more people are joining now with these virtual paloozas and things like that, and saying, okay, I wasn't able to go to a conference, but now I can join LPA and connect other ways. So but I'm
Yeah.
very excited for the chapter, and I hope you guys get to meet soon.
Yeah, we're doing a speaking of virtual, we're doing a Halloween party.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so it's a virtual Zoom Halloween party. We've got we hired a face painter and she's done a little video to show how to do like
Okay.
scary makeup.
Yeah.
So, and all LPs or LP connected people are welcome. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just our chapter, but you know, we wanted to do something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, meet, even though we can't meet. But I think you're right. I think the COVID, you know, obviously has made some things a lot harder, but it's also taught us a lot. And so I really hope that some of these things, like you said, carry over, because being able to connect is just so important as a human.
Mm-hmm.
So we've touched on this a little bit, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what so my youngest is 6, and we're getting through this I'm not a little person, I'm tall like my brother face. And so I just address it lightly, and no big, she'll figure it out. She's teeny tiny, she'll figure it out. Her brother's super tall.
Is your
But
son average height?
he's actually, their dad is 6'6", so he's gonna be tall, like,
Okay.
so he's not even average. Like, he's legit tall.
Not the average height, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but I try to explain to her that there are benefits to being a little person. Like, yeah, there's tons of challenges too, but I would love to hear, your perspective on any.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So I kind of can give 2 examples. And some people might say, I don't want this, for me, but people remember you. I remember when I was in college, I was at that, I think my sophomore year, I was considering teaching. I'm not a teacher now, but I was considering teaching, and I had to do like a school shadowing at a high school. And I remember some of the kids were a little bit disrespectful just because of, I guess me being a little person. I think the principal felt, he felt bad that happened, especially because I was a volunteer coming in and, maybe going to be a future educator at the time. And I went to his office and we had a great conversation. I told him at the time how I wanted to be a teacher and things like that. And he said, out of a stack of 100 people, of 100 resumes I get, or 10 interviews that I do, because I'm going to remember you. You're going to stick out. You're going to make, you're going to bring something unique to the table. And I think, again, sometimes it doesn't work in our advantage that people remember you for the wrong reasons or want to single you out. But I think when you meet those great people in life who want to, embrace diversity and different voices and things like that, that made me feel really good about myself. One other thing is, LPA is such a unique organization. I mean, being in my 30s, friendships can be hard in the sense of, my friends are having kids or getting married or moving to parts of the country. So like LPA, gives me this opportunity to meet people, whenever I want to meet them, and not my average height friends don't necessarily have that. I'm able to travel to, one of my things is before I die, I want to go to all 50 states. LPA has allowed that. I never thought I would go to Wisconsin or Michigan. I had no family there, but I was able to go to conferences there. Or when we and I went to the Seattle conference years ago, a lot of cruises from Alaska leave from Seattle. So we did a cruise to Alaska. Then we spent a week in Seattle for LPA. So it gives you the travel opportunities. And then other thing is just my mom and I were in Aruba last year, and we were at this butterfly farm, and this woman comes up to me and she goes, "Are you part of LPA?" And I went, "Oh, I wonder how this conversation's going to go." And then she goes, "Well, my daughter's a little person." And they were such a lovely couple. And we ended up having a drink with them later that night. And we didn't know no one in Aruba. We were just my mom and I on vacation, but we were able to have this connection with this other couple traveling or things like that. And, so that was kind of cool, so, having that, being able to stand out, being able to being in the community and traveling and meeting others, I think is something that, and I think your kids will appreciate that, and your daughters, especially when they get older. And, I just think now when you're 6, it's hard to appreciate that, I would say.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, I remember my mom, when I was maybe a little bit older than that, I wanted to be like all the girls who had skinny legs. I want to look like that. My mom was, "What?" And she said, "You're beautiful, but you're not going to have skinny legs. You're not going to, but it doesn't make you any less of a person." And, but that's totally common. But I think, not to minimize what your daughter's going through right now, but it's so great that she has a credible mother who can, she can look up to, and you have another daughter as a little person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so just I didn't have that, so
Right.
I think that's such a great thing that she has. And and she'll have a brother to protect her, and a brother who will you know, love her and love her for who she is and things like that. And I have two half brothers and they're over 6 feet tall. My dad's over 6 foot tall, so I did not get that gene. I got my dad's sense of humor and things like that, but I didn't get the height gene, so I can kind of relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny how, so Aiden, my oldest, she is 11. She'll be 12 in December.
And that's a tough age.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a fun age, but it's tough, just with middle school and things like that.
Yeah, the hormones are starting, so that's exciting. But for as long as I can remember, she's always been aware of her height. And so she's had her moments where it's gotten her down, but for the most part, she has so much self-confidence, and I'm so glad. I hope that she keeps that. But I think I agree with everything that you said, and I also feel like, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like people tend to make, instead of having an implicit negative opinion of you or us as LPs, like people tend to make the best assumption first about me. Like they tend to make positive assumptions about me before they even get to know me. And I don't know if it's because I'm like not I don't want to say offensive, but honest, like my frame is unassuming, so it's easier to kind of connect. I don't know.
I think I get all different interactions. Again, depending on the environment, you do get people who want to get to know you and are comforted by you. I mean, I'm a talker. And I like talk to strangers. I know it sounds kind of weird. Kids don't talk to strangers. No, but I'm the person, if I'm on an airplane pre-COVID, I'm sitting, I'm talking to the person next to me. Like that's who I am. But I think that, one thing is that when I'm out with, let's say my mom or friends, that people will want to address my mom, be like, oh, does she need that? Can she help? And yes, I don't have a mental or an intellectual disability, but even if I did have an intellectual disability, you always address the person. I don't care what that person's communication challenges are, things like that. Like you always address the person. And again, I try to play devil's advocate. Yes, there are assholes out there. There are rude people out there, but there are people who like, because they haven't been around disability, like I understand that they're ignorant like that. Like I'm not going to get upset because if I got upset with everything, I wouldn't be able to live my life just like you. But I wonder too, I was going to ask you this, not to be the interviewer, but
No, go ahead.
Growing up, I think what bothered me, and even bothers me, not really now, I mean, I'm a lot older now, but seeing my parents, not necessarily my dad, seeing my mom, like if she was upset that people were, especially kids, like reacting that way. And I would be upset because she was upset. And I always, sometimes I remember I have a close relationship with a little boy in LPA who has achondroplasia and his parents are average height. And I always say, like, be careful how you react to the situations, because your kid, he's going to be upset because you're upset.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, I think you have such a unique and interesting experience because you're a parent of an LP, but you're also an LP.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're validated to feel those things when they happen, but you also want to protect your kids, because if you get upset, then they're going to feed off that energy. So I just wonder how you feel about that.
Yeah, so I try to, I'm a pretty like low key just person in general. Like I prefer to give people the benefit of the doubt. I believe that most things aren't personal. 99% of things aren't personal.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, if I completely agree, if somebody's being a complete jerk, then I'll remove them from the situation. And if they have questions, we'll talk about it. I'm very, very open and how we talk about things. But so my ex-husband was the kind to like make a scene and make a big deal about it. And my dad was that way too. And that was always so mortifying. and I am definitely not that way.
Mhm.
And I just try to, I don't want to say gloss it over, because I don't want, if there's a legit situation, then we'll talk about it. If it's just somebody staring and being, ridiculous, then I'll just try to remove them. I try to be cognizant of the energy I bring to them just in general, because especially right now, I feel so overwhelmed and stressed out, and I noticed, like, Friday, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and I was just griping about everything, and then that just set them off into a mood, and it was like, you're not doing anybody any favors. So,
Yeah.
but like you said, it's hard when you're a parent, because you do get upset, but it it absolutely rubs off, and the way that you react leaves more of an impression than the words that you say. So if I were to react one way and then later on try to talk to them about it, they're going to remember how I reacted, not necessarily the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that again, we can say that hurt me, or
Yeah.
that hurt mommy when somebody said that, or that, but I remember the first time I ever saw my mom cry, it was, we watched The Parent Trap in theaters, and she cried at the end scene. But it was always, remember when you grew up, you saw your parents crying, you're like, this is really weird. Like, I'm supposed to be the one who's crying. So when you're upset about it, like, I don't. So I just think that kids sometimes, even me at 30, my parents react, I'm like, why? I mean, but
Yeah.
you want to. They should have those emotions and feel that way. But
Right.
too, that some of the situations where the LP child is feeling like really, like, they're not feeling safe, or they're feeling like really uncomfortable, then sometimes if the parent can kind of direct that energy somewhere and then address it more in a safer environment where they can talk about it more.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think that we could probably keep talking forever, but we are getting close to time. And so I have one last question that I'm asking everybody. Can you tell us about a time where somebody did something ridiculous or rude, or asked you to do something stupid, or?
So I think, when we go out in public and we don't know, when we're amongst strangers, I'm just speaking for Danielle Frank. I'm not speaking for every LP, that you can sometimes get used to people being rude or uncomfortable situations. And you're like, okay, that person doesn't know me, or I don't, and I just, whatever. I think it hurts when it's in a safe, when you experience something when you think you're in a safe space. So I went to a family wedding 4 years ago, and I didn't really know, we didn't know the bride or groom that well, it was my mom's cousin's son getting married. And it was kind of like a family reunion. It's like one of these weddings where like all the cousins go. So like you kind of see people you haven't seen in a while. And again, I didn't really know, I knew my mom's side of the family, but I didn't really know 3/4 of the wedding per se. But it's a wedding, you feel it's a safe environment. You feel, okay, I can let loose or, do whatever. And the bride and groom were doing their first dance, and everyone was standing up, and I couldn't see it, but I didn't really have a close relationship with the bride and groom, so it wasn't like I feel like I was missing out. And in the corner of my eye, I see the groomsman, one of the groomsmen, and he has the camera mode facing himself, and he's like about 5, 6 feet, like, ahead of me, and the camera mode's like, it's on himself, and he's putting the camera down to his private part area, and he starts snapping photos, and I went, what? Like, and I think I was in shock. I was like, oh, that can't be happening. I'm overreacting. Like, because, sometimes how you feel like you get nervous when you hear a camera click or things like that. And I went, oh my gosh, like, this is actually happening, like this. And it was such a hard experience, because again, I felt like I was in a safe environment with family, and the groomsman, he was not related to, I think he was a friend of the groom. I don't know who he was. And somebody in my family called him out on it, and he came over to apologize, but it was really mortifying, because, like, again, like, I'm at a wedding. I don't feel like educating people. I don't feel like doing that. Like, I just want to, enjoy my time with family I haven't seen in a while. And so I think those situations where you feel like you're in a safe environment and that bubble burst and you're like, oh, I'm not safe, I think that was one of the hardest things. Like I said, if I'm out in public and somebody's being rude, I'm like, oh, well. But when you're in this environment where you feel like you're safe and that happens, that's really tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And people are always surprised when I tell them how often people take our pictures. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't get it. What do you do with the photos? But
I know it happened at an LPA conference, because when you go to an LPA conference, there's other hotel guests, and somebody I knew, they took a photo of her daughter, and it was horrible to see that person I knew go through that.
yeah.
But it can even happen at LPA conferences, that bubble being burst. So, like you and I are pretty similar, that we love to live life to the fullest and try to go out there and do things, but you're a little bit on guard each time, like, okay, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are absolutely right about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is much harder when you let your guard down, because you assume that that's it's not going to happen, and then it
I
does.
think 100 times scary because you have children,
Yeah.
things like that. But I just, Angela, this was such great talking to you, and I could talk to you for hours. And I'm so grateful for this interview, and you interviewing other people, and how you're using your platform to just spread positive messages or educating people. Because even people who follow us, like our friends, we're always teaching them. And like, I'm like, all my friends know everything about being dwarfism or this. I'm like, no, they don't. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm always learning too. Like, I don't, I'm also, with my job, I work with students with disabilities primarily too. And I'm learning about different disabilities that are outside of, so we're always educating ourselves. And I mean, that's the key to being a good human being, I think. But I really thank you for writing for the magazine. If LPA members, please take a look at our article. She's also featured in our cover photo. So I love that. And I think you're going to be writing more LPA articles, I hope, or LPA Today articles. And I hope to actually physically meet you in person when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many. That's one of the reasons why I was so excited about Austin, because there's so many people that I'm just dying to just hug and meet. But
Mm-hmm.
it'll happen. It'll happen.
It will happen.
So thank you again, Danielle. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. This is like, I think we could probably literally talk for like 2 or 3 more hours. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do, because all of that work in LPA makes, things possible. And it's such an amazing organization. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon, talk to you soon.
Definitely.
And good night, everybody. I
Good
love
night.
you.